Okay, welcome back everyone to Sanhedrin. We're on page 19b, making rapid progress. We're going to do a new little bit today. So let's share the Gemarah straight away. Oh, helps if I put the right screen on. Wait a minute. Try again. Now that should work. Right, there we go. You can see the screen, yes? Good. Right. And Leslie's here as well. Very good. Right. So we are on page 110 for you, Michael. But put your finger in 102 because we're going there in a minute. Okay. We're going back to the Mishnah in a minute. We are up to this bit here. We finished off last week. I wasn't here. So 2 weeks ago, we told that terrible story about Shimon ben Shattach and King Yanai. Leslie made the observation at the end of the shiur that Shimon ben Shattach was really the one who caused all this aggravation. And we made the observation, all of us, that nobody was really covered in glory with this story. Least of all, the original process. And that was just immediately before Tisha B'Av that was perhaps.
We're losing a sound.
Okay, give me the thumbs up when I'm back. Tell me when I'm back, because we're going to. I've not been able to get my fibre optics, by the way, because my neighbour is still messing around with his building. Can you hear me yet, Michael? Ish. Better? Yes, good. Okay, let's go straight on. We're over here on the screen here. The Mishnah said, Lo choletz v'lo choltzin. He does not do chalitza, and he can't have chalitza done in his for him, as it were. Who are we talking about?
Canan Gadol.
No, we finished with him, Leslie.
I'm sorry.
We're talking about the king now.
Oh, the king, of course.
Because last week or last time, we were talking about a king who can or cannot be judged, if you remember.
Yep.
So we're finished with the Kohen Gadol. We're on the king. Now, the king cannot do chalitza, and the king's widow cannot have chalitza done to her. Now, you all remember what chalitza is, yes? Chalitza is the... No, chalitza is not yibum. Chalitza is what you do.
It's connected. It's connected with a person who dies married but childless.
Correct. So that's a person who dies childless. The widow, the brother of the childless man who died, has an obligation to marry the widow, and that is called Yibum. If he doesn't want to or can't, then he has to do this process called Chalitza, which involves the shoe and spitting in front of them. And if you remember, when we actually did the Mishnah many months ago, I showed you a video, 2 videos. I showed you one of a Chalitza in New York, in a Hasidic place, and I showed you another really fascinating video of one in Tehran, amongst the Sephardim. So if you want to go back and have a look at that, you can try and work out which shiur it was. It was from the Mishnah, right at the beginning of chapter 2. So that's Chalitza. Now, we need to go back to the Mishnah, really, to know exactly what it's talking about, because we've got this little word here in our Gemarah, v'chule. Vav chaf vav, which means v'chule, which stands for etc. So, of course, when you're learning the Gemarah, you're meant to know exactly what the Mishnah said without having to go back to the Mishnah. But, of course, we don't. So we go back to the Mishnah. It's on page 102 in yours, Michael, and it's on 18a if you're in the Vilna Shas. So here is the Mishnah. Lo choltzin, lo choletz, velo choltzin leishto. A king does not do chalitza, and chalitza is not performed with his wife, meaning his widow. Lo miyabem, he can't do yibum, so he can't marry his brother's widow. Velo miyab min leishto, and his brother can't marry the king's widow if the king dies childless. But then there's a dissenting view. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Im ratza lachlot ulayabein, if he wants to do chalitza or yibum, zachor latov. What does that mean? Zachor latov.
Something for good. So it's a memorial for good, a memory for good.
He is remembered for good, meaning
he's done a good thing.
Yeah, meaning he's done a good thing. So the Mishnah starts by saying he doesn't do this. Rabbi Yehuda says, but if he wants to, then he's considered to be a good chap. Where have you heard Zachor Latov before? Where have you heard that before?
Megillah?
Very good. And who was Zachor Latov? Who was remembered for good in the Megillah?
Mordechai?
No.
It's got to be Esther, isn't it?
No.
Interesting.
Come on, David, you've got a smirk on your face. You're dying to tell us.
It's not in the Megillah, it's in Shoshanas Yaakov that we say after the Megillah.
It's true. You knew what she meant. Yes. Charvona. Charvona. Who was Charvona? Charvona was one of Esther's chamberlains. Okay, one of Esther's chamberlains. When did you last use chamberlain in everyday language? Not very often. Anyway, he was one of Esther's Nochschleppers. And when the whole business with Haman blew up in the king's face, in other words, when Esther engineered the story where she had them both at a party and she said, there's somebody here that wants to kill me and all my people. And the king said, me who's ever who is this person who would do such a terrible thing? And Esther said, Haman hara hazer, this evil Haman. And then Charvona pipes up and says, hey, and by the way, Haman has prepared gallows for a chap called Mordechai who spoke well of the king. And so the king, Achashverosh, who had a bit of a temper on him and was a little bit of a hothead, immediately said, Taluhu alav, hang him on them, or on it. So we say in Shoshanat Yaakov, which is the little song that we sing after the Megillah, we say that Charvona should be Zachor Latov. He should be remembered for good. Why? Because it was he who reminded the king at the absolute apropos time that there were some gallows there that this wicked Haman had prepared for Mordechai, who'd saved the king's life. And the idea being that had Charvona not mentioned it at that time, the king's anger would have settled down. The anger of the king would have settled down, and he might not have, in the end, hanged Mordechai. So Charvona was your archetypal opportunist. He jumped in there and said, hey, king, there's some gallows there waiting for somebody to go on. And the king fell for the bait, good and proper, and said, hang him. So that's where we know the word Zachor Latov. We remember him for good. So what Rabbi Yehuda is saying is, if there were to be a king who had an opportunity to do Chalitza or Yibum, and he didn't have to do it, but he chose to do it, then Zachor Latov. We remember him for good. In other words, that's a good king. That's a good thing to do. Amrulo, back in the Mishnah now, Amrulo, they said to him, who said to him, who? The Chachamim said to Rabbi Yehuda, who's having this discussion, nah, you're wrong. Even if he were to say, I want to do Chalitza, or I want to do Yibum, Ein Shomin Lo. We don't listen to him. We don't listen to him. He's not allowed to, even if he wants to. I mean, that we're assuming that even if he wants to do it for a good reason. I mean, obviously, if he wants to do it just because he fancies his sister-in-law, then that wouldn't be a good thing that he would be Zachor Latov for. But if he wanted to do Chalitza because it was a mitzvah, and he wanted to do Yibum because it was a mitzvah, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he's Zachor Latov, he's remembered for good. And according to the Chachamim, we say, sorry, king, we're not listening to you, you're not allowed. Now, why would the Chachamim say such a thing? Why would the Chachamim say, we don't listen to him? Why do they disagree with Rabbi Yehuda? I understand Rabbi Yehuda's view. Rabbi Yehuda says, all right, he doesn't have to. Okay, let's go back a step. Let's go back a step. Why do the Chachamim in the first place say he doesn't do Chalitza and he doesn't do Yibum? Let's take Chalitza first. What is the process of Chalitza? Yes, go on, Julia. It is demeaning, but expand on that a little bit. Tell me why it's demeaning for the king.
Well, because he's being treated as an ordinary citizen, and the whole process is demeaning.
Go on, tell me about the process. What's demeaning about the process?
Chalitza's the one with the shoe.
Yes.
Well, I would just actually, do you know what? And I wonder if this is relevant, but my mother, who was superstitious, used to throw a slipper after us when we left the house as a sign of good luck. But I'm not sure if anybody else's mother did the same thing. Otherwise, I used to do it with my children. But the process of the shoe, it's not appropriate for the office, I think.
Correct. And it's not just the shoe, is it? What else does she have to do apart from throw a shoe?
Spitting.
She spits in front of him. That's the really demeaning bit. She spits in front of him, and the Bet Din says, this is what happens when a person doesn't want to build up the house of his brother, right? And it's a very demeaning process. You're absolutely right. And it's not fitting for the office of the king. What about Yibum? That's not demeaning. Why do they say he can't do Yibum? In other words, why can't he marry his sister-in-law?
Maybe he wanted to murder his brother to get hold of the sister-in-law.
Okay, that's very bad-minded of you, Michael, but possibly.
But it happens a lot. It happens a lot that the king used to murder anybody who was challenging him. So why shouldn't he murder his brother-in-law to get the woman that he wanted?
Okay, where have you seen a king who effectively murdered somebody to get their wife?
David and Bathsheba.
Yes, David and Bathsheba. We will learn about that in the not too distant future in the Shmuel Bet Shiur. How exciting that we can say that we've got a Shmuel Bet Shiur, which will be beginning Be'ezrat Hashem on Sunday. So yes,
but also when Abraham goes to Egypt with Sarai, he also tells her to be his sister, because if he tells people she's his wife, he's likely to get killed. It was
good point.
Probably very prevalent at the time.
You're absolutely right. So Michael's bad-mindedness is very well founded. So you may well say that the reason, it's not actually what they say, but I like your reasoning, Michael. I'm going to look it up, and if I don't find it anywhere, then it's going in Chidushei Poleg. Okay, I'm going to write that down. Actually, hang on a minute. I need to write it down. I might forget otherwise. Give me a sec. So Yibum not allowed for a king because he might kill his brother to get his wife. Okay, we'll look up and see if anybody suggests that. All right.
How is your book coming along, Johnny?
Well, I've got lots of little scribbles on pieces of paper, but that's as far as I've got. I think it's going to have to wait until I'm retired. Not sure when that will be, but it's in the process. It's in the process, and that's going to be the second book because we've got to write a first book first, haven't we, Leslie? We've got to do a first book first.
Not we, Johnny. You.
Okay, so the real reason, not the real reason, a reason that that is suggested why Yibum is not allowed for a king according to the Chachamim is connected with the same reason why Chalitza is not allowed. So Chalitza, so first of all, they say the two things are interdependent. So if you can't do Chalitza, you can't do Yibum, okay? And that's a simple reason. But there's another reason that they give as well, also connected with Chalitza. Julia said correctly, that Chalitza is demeaning for the king, demeaning for the office of the king. And it's very interesting that you said the office of the king, because we're going to come back to that in a moment, in a little while. So it's demeaning for the office of the king. In what way could Yibum be perceived as demeaning to the office of the king? You've got to think.
Couldn't have anything to do in parallel with the Kohen HaGadol has to marry a virgin, and the king. This doesn't sound right. This really doesn't sound politically correct. Can the king marry somebody who's been? I mean, he can, but can he? Is it a good thing for the king to marry somebody who's been somebody else's wife?
Okay, well, the king can do what he likes. He can marry somebody else's leavings if he wants. There is no Isur like there is for a Kohen Gadol, because of course the Kohen Gadol's Isur is because he is excessively holy, being the Kohen Gadol. The king is not excessively holy; he's just excessively powerful. So no, he is allowed to marry a non-virgin. David, can you help me here? Why would it seem to be demeaning to the king to do Yibum?
Note 19 in the art scroll on the Mishnah.
Yes, note 19 on the art scroll in the Mishnah. Okay, tell us about note 19 then.
So it says if the king's brother dies without children, the reason for not performing the Yibum with the sister-in-law is that the whole idea of Yibum is to establish the family, or to continue the family name, and that wouldn't be a reason for the king. That would also be like beneath his dignity that he's establishing someone else's family's name.
Yeah, so he has a kid with this sister-in-law, and it's not considered his kid. It's considered his brother's kid. And that's not suitable for a king to have a prince who is not a prince. So the Chachamim said, just as and by the way, Chalitza and Yibum are connected, so no Chalitza, no Yibum. But as an added on reason, they say Yibum would be demeaning because it would mean that he is in effect procreating with another woman to have somebody else's child, which is a wonderful mitzvah to do, but it's not demeaning. It does not befit the king's office.
Can I ask, please? Because I did think I asked this last time, and I'm not sure that I'm very clear on this. But for Yibum, is it correct or is it not correct that there is no marriage ceremony? is there a marriage ceremony with the widow, whether temporarily or not, or if they're not? I mean, if there is, then the child would be a legitimate child of the king. There's no reason why not. He wouldn't be born out of wedlock.
I don't think it makes any difference whether there is a marriage ceremony or not, because one of the ways in which you can acquire a wife, as long as you're allowed to acquire that wife, is by bia, sexual relations. So automatically she becomes his wife. So the presence or absence of chuppah and kiddushin, chuppah and kiddushin, if you like, are belts and braces. We do it, and it's become masoret, it's become tradition, it's become halacha that we do chuppah and kiddushin. But there are different ways you can acquire a wife. What are the ways you can acquire a wife? Shtar. What does the word shtar mean? Anyone know?
A note.
Yes, a document, a document. So a ketubah is a shtar. So shtar is a document. Kesef, money. So by giving something to her, you acquire her. And bia. Kesef, shtar, and bia are the three ways you can acquire her. Now, we today, all three.
The sound's gone again.
Okay, so I'm back because this is an important bit. No good. Okay, I'll keep on chirping until the thing goes the other way. Tell me what you can hear me again, please. No. I'm coming back. Surely you can hear me now. Getting there. Getting there. No. Yes. Right. So there are three ways you can effect a marriage in Jewish in real Jewish law, if you like, pure Jewish law. Shtar, kesef, bia, a document, a legal document, monetary gift, and sexual relations. We today do all three. We have a ketubah, which is a shtar. We have a ring, which is kesef, and we have yichud. We have the where they go off into the yichud room, where they may or may not engage in sexual activity, but they have the opportunity to do so, and that is why you have to have eidim outside the door to make sure that nobody else goes in, so that they are secluded with one another. And to do yichud properly, you have to wait at least 10 or 12 minutes, because apparently that's how long it takes once you've got to take off all that, big wedding dress and all. I don't go into the details, but if you're an aide for yichud, and you're one of those sentries who are posted outside the door to make sure all is well, and that nobody comes in or goes out for those 12 minutes, you have to watch the clock. Because if they come out too soon, then that's not considered proper yichud. And we assume, for the sake of halacha, that they engaged in sexual relations in the yichud room. Usually you just have something to eat, but who knows? So in modern Jewish law, we do all three: shtar, bia, and kesef. But that is belts and braces. The fact that the king takes the woman, his sister-in-law, or whoever it is who does Yibum, even without the shtar and the kesef, is b'diavad, after the event, satisfactory. So that's not an answer.
But then the child, is the child deemed to be the child of the deceased brother? Or
yes.
Is the child right?
Yes, that's the whole point of Yibum.
Yeah.
The whole point of Yibum is that dead brother, his name should not be lost. So he will be the child will be known as the son of the deceased. That's the whole point. He's meant to, the expression used in the Torah is that he builds up the house of his brother. And when he refuses to do so, and they chuck the shoe and they spit in front of them, they say, this is how we treat somebody who refuses to build up the house of his brother. So the whole point of Yibum is that. So the idea is that that is a demeaning thing for a king to do. And so we don't allow him to do it. Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, says, well, if a king wants to do something that is beneath his dignity, in other words, in Hebrew, there's an expression, mochel et kvodo. What does mochel mean? What is mechila?
It's a sale.
No, that's mechira with a resh, and it's also with a chaf and not a chet.
Absolves.
Absolve or forgive, yes. Slicha u mechila. What about on Yom Kippur? Slach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu. Yeah? Good job Philip's not here, who'd be singing it for us. Okay? Slach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu. Slach lanu, forgive us. Mechal lanu, a different type of forgiveness. Kaper lanu, atone for us. Okay? So mechila is a forgiveness or an absolution. So if you are, and this is an expression that's used in Yiddish as well, quite commonly now. If you are Michael, you're covered, right? And Michael, if I'm Michael, my covered, it means that I put aside my honor, right? So a Kohen or even a Levi like Leslie, who gets first dibs at the Aliyah and gets first dibs at benching, and is meant to get first dibs if you've got, you know, something nice there. You're meant to offer it the Kohen or the Levi first. He might say to you, in Yiddish, you might say, "Am mochel my covered." In Hebrew, you would say, "Ani mochel et kvodi." I put aside, I absolve everybody from my honor. So what Rabbi Yehuda is saying is, if he wants to, he can be mochel his kavod. He can put his kavod to one side, and he can do that which we would consider is not kavod for a king. On the other hand, the Chachamim, they say, no, it's not about you, king. And this is why I liked what Julia said earlier on. It's about the office of the king. Okay? It's about the office of the king. Now, it's a very important distinction, because I'll tell you a very nice story about somebody who the Londoners amongst us may know this rabbi, Rabbi Mordechai Ginsbury. Anybody know him? He is the rabbi of Hendon United Synagogue, Raleigh Close. He has been there for the last 25 years. But before that, he was the rabbi in Prestwich, in Shrubberies. He's exactly the same age as me. He's about a few months younger than me, I think. I think his birthday is in March, I think, and I'm in September, but we're very much the same age. He came to Manchester. This was his first job as a communal rabbi, age 26. He was a rookie rabbi. I was a rookie doctor. We became very, very close. We were chevrusas. We were very close friends. Our kids grew up together. We spent many, many hours supposedly learning together, but usually just chatting and putting the world to rights, etc. We were very, very close. And he was the Rav in Shrubberies. And I remember one occasion that I was davening in Shrubberies on a weekday morning, and he was giving the halacha after davening. And he said some halacha, I don't know what it was. And I piped up afterwards with a different opinion. And I said something else, which he dealt with. And then afterwards, he said to me, he was cross with me. And he was right, because I challenged him in public, in front of the rest of the Kehillah there. I challenged him. Doesn't matter whether I was right or wrong. I was probably wrong, because he's far more knowledgeable than me. But even if I was right, he was cross with me. It was the only time in our entire, what is it now, almost 40-year friendship that he ever got cross with me. And he was right. But he wasn't cross because I had challenged him personally. I had challenged the position of Rav of that Kehillah. And I should not have done that in public. I should have waited afterwards, and then anybody have gone, I should have said, hey, Monty, I don't agree with that. Explain yourself, right? And that would have been absolutely fine. But I didn't do that, and it was wrong. And he was absolutely willing to be mochel on his covered, because that's not the kind of person that he was, that he would stand on his covered. Not at all like that at all. But he was very careful about the kavod of the position of the rabbi of the shul, especially in a place like Shrubberies, a United Synagogue, where it's very important that they have kavod for the rav. When you said the office of the king, Julia, that was absolutely spot on. It's not the personal kavod of the king, it's the office of the king. And that's why the Chachamim will say, it's all very well, king, if you want to give up on your own personal kavod and do Chalitza and do Yibum because you're a good fellow. We're not allowing you, we're not listening to you, because that will demean the office of the king. A fascinating idea there. And I don't know whether, Julia, when you said that, you had that in mind, but it was absolutely spot on what you said about it demeans the office of the king. So that was the Mishnah. That was the Mishnah. Now we need to go. Yes, Hannah.
There's an expression in Hebrew that says, Av hamochel b'kvodo, kvodo machul. Melech hamochel b'kvodo, kvodo lo machul. Which basically means a father, a father who doesn't stand on his honor or respect, it's okay. He can do that. But a king who absolves his honor or his respect, it's not absolved. It doesn't, I can't put it any better. I don't know how.
Okay, I'm very suspicious that in a previous life, Hannah, you've learned this Gemarah before.
Oh, okay.
Because we are going to come to exactly that point. Go back to the Gemarah now, page 110 for you, Michael. 19b for David. It's on the screen for you. Here we are. So, lo choletz v'lo chotzin v'chule. We've just done v'chule, okay? We've just done the etc. We went back to the Mishnah and we've done the etc. The Gemarah now asks a question. Ini. Is that the case? What is he talking about? He's talking about the Rav Yehuda's opinion. The Gemarah is challenging here Rav Yehuda's opinion that he's allowed to be mochel the kavod of the king. And look what he says, Hannah. V'ha'amar Rav Ashi. Has Rav Ashi not said, afilu leman de'amar, even according to the one who says, nasi shemachal al kvodo, kvodo machul, a nasi, a president, or in our case, the nasi here refers to the head of the Sanhedrin. Okay, the head of the Sanhedrin was given the title nasi. The nasi, the president or the head of the Sanhedrin, shemachal al kvodo, who absolves everybody from his honor. In other words, you don't need to call me Mr. President. You don't need to stand up for me when I walk in. All that stuff. I'm not bothered about any of that stuff. Kvodo machul. His kavod, his honor, is absolved. He's allowed to do that. Melech Shamachal al kvodo, ein kvodo machul. But a king who says, I'm not interested in any of the kavod. You don't have to call me your majesty. You don't have to bow. You don't have to curtsy. You don't have to do all that nonsense. That kavod is not absolved. Exactly what Hannah said. Well, instead of a father, it was a nasi. Then don't read on. Hannah, I'm going to ask you a question since you're the one that's brought this up. Why? Give me a proof why it's okay for a father in your expression or the nasi in the Gemara to be Michael his covered, but not for a king. I want a scriptural proof, please. But you're not allowed to look into the Gemara. Okay, I'm going to show you. You can look in the Gemara now. Okay, the Gemara brings us a scriptural proof for the fact that the king is not allowed to absolve others from honoring him. Shene'emar, as we have in the pasuk. Let me get the pasuk up for you. There it is. Our famous pasuk in Parashat Shoftim, in the Sefer Dvarim, chapter 17, verse 15. We must have quoted this pasuk dozens of times over the years. Som tasim alecha melech. You shall surely set a king over you. Asher yivchar Hashem Elokecha, which Hashem will choose. Mikerev achecha tasim alecha melech. Has to be one of your brothers who you appoint a king. Can't be a foreigner. Lo tuchal latet alecha ish nochri. Can't be a foreigner. Asher lo achicha who is not your brother. Where's the proof there that you cannot, a king cannot be Michael his covered, cannot set aside his honor? Where's the proof in that pasuk?
That is a pasuk, but isn't the king supposed to be representative of God? As God being the king?
Only in as much as God is Melech Malchei HaMelachim, the King of Kings, but he's not a representative of God. The Navi is a representative of God, if anybody. So where's our scriptural proof in that pasuk there?
See anything?
Well, it says one who God chooses.
Okay, yeah, I'll buy that. One who God chooses. So if God's chosen him, then you can't be Michael covered. All right, but that's not what the Gemara says. I like it, but it's not what the Gemara says. Here is what the Gemara says. Som tasim, a double expression. Som tasim. Can you see that? It's a double expression. If it had just said tasim alecha or som alecha, it would have meant the same. I translated it as you shall surely set a king, in order to give it some emphasis. Let's go back to the Gemara. Shenema som tasim alecha melech. The pasuk says that the double expression is teshetehei eimato alecha. There should be the fear or awe, A-W-E, the awe of the king shall be upon you. That's the double expression. And it's got to be so much upon you that it can't be set aside. Okay? So the question is, Rabbi Yehuda knew that pasuk. Why did he nevertheless say he's allowed to be Michael is covered? He can put aside his honor. Why? How is Rabbi Yehuda going to answer the Gemara's question? Sounds a good question to me. If you were Rabbi Yehuda, Leslie, how would you answer that?
If I was a Rabbi Yehuda, I would think, why is the king not allowed, or is not allowed? I'm stuck.
You would say, wouldn't you? That's a good question. I don't know the answer. That's what I would have said too, except I've read on in the Gemarah. And the real answer that Rebbe Yehuda gives is this, the next two words. Mitzvah shani. A mitzvah, what's shani mean?
Different.
Is different. Shoneh is different. When you say in Hebrew, lo meshaneh, you'll have heard that many times before. Lo meshaneh. What does that mean?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it makes no difference. Lo meshaneh. Lo meshaneh. Makes no difference. It's a very common expression. Mitzvah shani. A mitzvah is different. Says Rabbi Yehuda. You're right. A king cannot put aside his honor, except if it's for a mitzvah. If it's for a mitzvah, then the king can put aside his honor. And you know what, says Rabbi Yehuda? Chalitza and Yibum are a mitzvah. And so therefore, whilst I agree with you, says Rabbi Yehuda, generally speaking, a king cannot put aside his honor, and he's not allowed to say, you don't need to stand up for me, you don't need to call me your majesty, you don't need to curtsy or bow. He's not allowed to say that, because the office of the king deserves to be honored. But for a mitzvah, says Rabbi Yehuda, Zachor latov, that's a good thing. He's remembered for good. Why is he remembered for good? Because what he is effectively saying, isn't it? What he's effectively saying is that there is the office of the king. But a mitzvah to Hashem.
We're losing your sound again.
Oh, right. The important bit.
Can you hear me? No, you can't hear me. So I'm going to stop. I must stop until you can, because it's an important bit. Tell me when you can hear me again. Any good? No, Michael's thumb is stuck in the downward position. Coming back.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So what the king is effectively saying is, I recognize the fact that the office of the king is important, and generally speaking, you can't put aside the honor due to the king. But for a mitzvah, which is something that God has told us, even the king can put his covered aside, and therefore Zachor latov, he's remembered for good. You don't like that, Julia?
No, I don't at all, and I can see why the Hachamim don't accept that, because it's the individual that is performing the mitzvah, not the office of the king. I think that argument is not sustainable.
Okay, well, that's fair enough, and in fact, the halacha is, let's have a look. On the left-hand side, the Rambam explains that since the what's the halacha? There we go. There's the halacha. You are right, Julia. The halacha is according to the Chachamim and not Rav Yehuda. The king is not allowed to perform chalitza or yibum. So Julia is correct. She doesn't like Rav Yehuda's answer. Okay, so there we are. There we are. He is not allowed to do it. And by the way, according to the halacha as well, this expression, Melech shemachal al kvodo ein kvodo machul, is a halacha. You are not allowed to be over familiar with a king. You have to call him your majesty and bow and curtsy and stand when he comes in the room. Because a king who says, oh, don't bother with all that other nonsense, ein kvodo machul, his honor is not absolved. Masha'en came, which is not the case with the Nasi, the president, or the head of the Sanhedrin. It surprises me, actually, that the head of the Sanhedrin is allowed to do that, because I would have expected the office of the head of the Sanhedrin to be very, very important in maintaining justice. If you're over familiar, like I was with Rabbi Ginsbury, I was over familiar in the wrong setting. That demeans the office of the rabbi, and that's why he was cross with me, and he was right to be cross with me. So it surprises me, actually, that I see, and by inference, the rabbi is able to be mochel his kavod. I would have thought that it wasn't a good thing.
But they're different, aren't they? The king is a hereditary position. He is the king from birth. He's like potentially the king from birth. He's got royal blood. The Nasi doesn't have royal blood.
Okay, but I don't think that alters my argument. My argument is that, and which is why I think Rabbi Ginsbury was right. What I did lowered the position of the rabbi in the eyes of the community, because the rabbi said the halacha is X, and I, cheeky so-and-so, said, I think you're wrong, it's Y. And I don't remember what it was all about, and I don't know how I said it, but I must have said it in a way that wasn't right, because he challenged me on it afterwards, and it was right. So by doing that, I demeaned the position of the rabbi in the eyes of the community. And if you double that up, if you like, to the Sanhedrin, which is the head of the Supreme Court, if the head of the Supreme Court comes to court in jeans and a t-shirt, instead of his long red robe and his shaitel, then that's going to demean the position of the head of the court. And similarly, somebody saying, "Hey, Frank, or Bob, how you doing?" instead of Your Honor or Your Lordship or whatever it is that your presidency or your whatever it is you're meant to say, demeans the office. And I think personally, I think the same concept applies to the Nasi. But
you're not comparing like with like at all, because your example of your being disrespectful to the rabbi, it's quite correct. The office of the rabbi should be held in respect. So should the office of the Nasi. But this is a different case. We're talking about something entirely a specific instance where I don't think the Nasi, who obviously should engender respect for whatever he does, but this is something further than that, and he is not the same as the king.
Are you talking about Chalitza and Yibum now?
Yes, because
no,
we
I'm not
only
talking about Chalitza and Yibum. I understand that. I understand. I'm talking about the expression here. This is a general expression. Nasi shemachal al kvodo kvado machul. If the Nasi wants to dismiss his kavod, and not talking about Yibum now and Chalitza, he comes into court, in his shorts and t-shirt, and he says, "You know what, guys, I run a really friendly court here. You don't have to call me Your Honor. You don't have to bow before me. You just treat me like one of the boys. I'm one of the boys." He's allowed to do that, whereas the king isn't. And I'm saying that I'm surprised at that, because I think that it's important to maintain the dignity and honor of the office of the Nasi in the same way as it is with the king. The halacha is different. The halacha says there is a difference between the king and the Nasi. I, as you know, do a lot of expert witness work, and when I actually go to court, the protocol is very, very strictly adhered to. All the barristers bow before they leave. The court rises when the judge comes in. The barristers bow. The others don't bow. I didn't know that until fairly recently, actually. It's only the barristers that bow in front of the judge. Did you know that? You probably did, Julia, but I wonder if everybody else did. Anyway, I digress. So that maintains the dignity of the court. So I'm surprised at this, but that is the halakha. Here, have a look over here on the left side of the page. A Nasi who relinquished the honor due to him, if a sage or Nasi chooses to relinquish the honor due to him, his honor is relinquished, and others are not required to honor him in that way, in accordance with the Gemarah here. However, in accordance with the ruling of a different Gemarah, it is appropriate to show him honor in some small way. So it looks like the Gemarah in Kiddushin, which maybe we should go to another time, is not entirely happy with that halakha and is tending towards my view. So I have a support, I think, for my view from the Gemarah in Kiddushin. Yes, Hannah?
I'm sticking with my opinion that when Israel wanted a king, like the other nations, yeah, it wasn't what God wanted. God wanted the Jewish people to have him as their king. But we came along and we said, no, we want something different. We want a flesh and blood king. And I think that there may be the halakha embodies the idea that the king is there in our terms in place, in inverted commas, of God. Because God, as Roberta said before, God chooses who will be king. And
I think there are two different things that you've said there, Hannah. The first one, we have to absolutely knock on the head, that the king is not there in place of God. That was the problem that the people said. They wanted a king, like you said, k'chol hagoyim, like all the other nations. But I do agree with the second bit that you said, which I think is what one of you said earlier on, Asher Yivchar Hashem, which Hashem has chosen. He is God's chosen. He is God's chosen. He's not in place of God, but he is God's chosen. And I agree that with your opinion on that. I think that is a good answer. And the Nasi is not God's chosen. He is elected by the people. So yeah, I agree. There is a good distinction. Right, we've got 5 more minutes. Let's go back to the Gemarah a sec. Where are we up to? We're up to yes, let's just do the next couple of lines because it is an introduction to the next rather long but fascinating section. And those of you who've been learning Shmuel Aleph with us, and those of you who are going to learn Shmuel Bet with us, this is tying in beautifully. Because the last bit of the Mishnah, just whiz back to page 102, or to page 18a. There's the Mishnah. The very last bit of the Mishnah says, Ve'ein nosein almanato. One may not marry a king's widow. Now, previously we were talking about Yibum, where his brother was not allowed to marry his widow if he died childless. What about if he didn't die childless? He's got children, and then he died. So the queen, Nebuch, is left on her own. According to the Chachamim in this Mishnah, nobody may marry a king's widow. Why not?
Because her status was elevated when she married him. Correct. And we don't go down in status.
Correct. It's beneath her dignity. Now, what would you expect Rabbi Yehuda to say?
The opposite.
Not quite, but he does bring a slight dispute. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Nosei hamelech almanato shel melech. The widow of a king, who can a widow of a king marry without her dignity being reduced?
Another king.
Another king. So King Fred of Norway is allowed to marry the widow of King John of Denmark, right? Or what have you. Because the widow is not marrying a commoner. So Rabbi Yehuda says, I agree with the Chachamim that she cannot marry a commoner, but she can marry another king. And now we ask you, okay, I'm going to move that down so you can't cheat. Bring me a scriptural proof for Rabbi Yehuda's view again. Rabbi Yehuda brings scriptural proof for the other one. What's his scriptural proof?
David married Saul's wife.
Who married Saul's wife?
David.
David married Saul's wife. How do you know that?
It's written in the art scroll.
Good answer. It is written in the art scroll, and I will show you where it says it. There we go. We will get there eventually, folks. It's in Shmuel Bet chapter 12. Probably take us about a year to get there at our current rate. But anyway, when we get to chapter 12, see if you remember this passage, which I'm going to read to you now. This is the story, or the aftermath of the story of David and Bathsheba. It is the one Bible story that everybody knows. It's funny that, isn't it? Everybody knows the story of David and Bathsheba. And what they don't always know is the aftermath of it. What happened was that the Navi at the time, who was the Navi at the time? Shmuel had died. So who was the Navi?
Natan.
Natan was the Navi. And he came along and he told David, he told him off, gave him a right Misha Beirach. And he told him a little story. I'll not go into the story now, but he told him a story which made David realize that what he'd done with Bathsheba was very wrong. And in part of telling him, he says that God has said to David, verse 8, I gave you the house of your master, meaning
Kingship.
Shaul, and your master's wives in your midst. And that means I've given you Shaul's wives. There is his scriptural proof. Let's go back to the Gemarah. There is his scriptural proof. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says a king's widow can marry another king because Shekain Matzinu, we find such a thing, but David, with David, Shenasa Almanato Shel Shaul, who he married the widow of Shaul, Shene'emah, as it says in the verse, and he quotes our verse, Vetna lecha et beit adonecha, I gave you the house of your master, vet neshei adonecha, and the wives of your master bechekecha, into your bosom. And that is what the Mishnah says. And so next time, we will go back to page 110 just for a second. We will look and ask the following question. Sha'alu Talmidav et Rabbi Yossi. The students of Rabbi Yossi asked a question. Oh, no, we won't come to that. We'll come to that next time. We'll leave it there. So, the Rabbi Yehuda, no, we won't leave it there. Just one more minute. Rabbi Yehuda says, I've got a proof for you. And the rabbis bat it back to him and they say, no. Amru lo Rabbi Yehuda. They said to Rabbi Yehuda, when it says that David married the daughters of, married the wives of Shaul, it means Nashim Haru'uyot lo mi Beit HaMelech. He married the ones that were appropriate for him. In other words, when it says Neshei HaMelech, it doesn't mean the wives of the king. What can Nashim mean as well as wives?
Women.
Women. It means women of the house of Shaul. Who did David marry?
Daughters.
Shaul's daughters.
But he married
Michal
Michal
and
well before he
Meirav.
was on the. He married Michal before he was on the throne.
Okay, all right, but doesn't. But the Chachamim say, "I gave you the women of Shaul," right? Doesn't, and so they're saying doesn't mean the wives. You're not allowed to marry the wife of a king. Remember, this is the Chachamim defending their position. We will see next week how this pans out. But just to let you know, it goes over a page and a half. So it's going to take us a few weeks to get through this very, very interesting section. So let's just recap what we did today. We talked about Chalitza and Yibum for a king. We talked about whether you're able to be Moichel, you're covered as a king or a Nasi. We spoke about whether anybody can marry the king's widow. Rabbi Yehuda says yes, but only if you're a king yourself. The Chachamim say no, even that's no good, and we'll go into that more in next week's shiur, please God. Any questions on today's shiur or anything else for that matter? Okay, in that case, I shall bid you a fond farewell.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
very soon.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
Thank you.